Hello everyone, today we're back on the Update 1.79 dev server, the second one, and we're looking at one of the new variants of the BF110. This is the G2. Now there are technically three new variants of the BF110 in game. We used to have the C4, that is replaced by the C7, the F2 and the G2 are fully new variants. So let's have a look at the G2, and then in another video we'll have a look at the F2. To start off with, if we look at the armor profile of the G2, you can see there's a definite improvement over some of its monoplane friends. 8.5 millimeters, and then we have another 8.5, an 8, 10.5, and then 58 millimeters bulletproof glass. On the front as well, some more 8.5s and some 10 millimeter steel. On top of that, on the engine hubs, you've got 5.5, and then what is this covering? The liquid cooling systems on either side also have protected plates of 6 millimeters. So, compared to a lot of other planes, the BF110 G2 does have a decent amount of armor on it, and it will help it against smaller caliber guns, such as the 7.7s that you see prominent around 3.7 for the British, at least as a secondary weapon to the Hispano Mark IIs. One of the main key things about the G2 though, even though it is battle rating 3.7, and you can see that it has some very interesting guns in the nose, including two MK10830s. I think these are the lowest BR MK108s that we have in the game now. They have 135 ammunition and 120 respectively. So one of them is slightly larger on the ammo count than the other one, and then backed up, and that is two 20mm MG151s. This thing has the same amount of firepower as something like a D12. It's actually got more firepower than something like a D12. It's much more similar to something like a D13 or even a DO335, and it's at 3.7. And the reason for this is because of its flight characteristics, but we'll get into them in a little bit. The engines that it's powered by, or at least what it says, they are 605B Daimler-Benz DBs. That sounds about right for the time. We're talking about an aircraft which is a 43-44 era German heavy fighter, and then it also has massive fuel tanks in the wings, which hopefully you won't be able to take a ton of fuel, otherwise this thing, which is already heavy, it'll be even heavier. Looking at the back gun, what you have is a double-barreled 7.92. What I mean by that is it's two 7.92mm MG81s stuck together, 750 ammunition per gun, so 1500 overall, so that's completely fine in the defensive department. No defense underneath it, but if somebody gets behind you, you're pretty much dead anyway. Two 7.92s, I mean, sometimes you'll kill people, but you're looking more of a trade there instead of just winning the battle unless you pilot snipe them, which is easier to do in something like the C7, but at the G2, when it's at 3.7, yeah, that ain't gonna happen that much. Modification-wise, this is where the party goes a little bit crazy. So you may be looking at this weaponry tab and going, holy hell, what's going on here? And you wouldn't be wrong. So, first of all, we have all of the different ammunition types of all of the guns, and I think if you're going to use this in a ground pounding role, or a role which is going to go after bombers, then taking the 20mm first, and then also the 30mm when they're available, is not a bad shout, because the 30mm, they have a decent default belt, but when you look at something like the night belt here, or the universal belt, you're getting a hell of a lot more oomph in your hits. So I think it's worth making it so you have less of those incendiary shells and more of the HE. The 20mm defaults for the MG151s are spectacular. They are one of the best default rounds in the game for a gun. I think the only better ones, in my opinion, are the 20mm Shevaks that you get for the Soviets. The universal targets, tracers, armored targets, and also stealth, they're all viable, they're all great. Just pick one which you feel most comfortable with. They're all going to do an insane amount of damage. So where does the interest come from with the G2? Well, it's with the extra modifications, these secondary weapons you find here. First of all, you're able to install yourself the W151 gun pod and also the BK3 37mm gun pod, I suppose. So, what is the WB151? It is this. You get 2 extra 20mm MG151s. Where are they sat, you may ask? Well, as you can see, they are sat right here. So you get 750 rounds of ammunition on top of the existing 200 rounds of ammunition for these 20mm, which is incredibly insane. I actually just want to make sure that I'm not cocking up here. Let's just see. I apologize, I cocked up. So you actually get 750 standard with the 20mm MG151s, and you're adding the extra ones below them. So if we have a look once again, you get an extra 200 rounds, and what you're looking at is 100 per gun in this area here. Now generally that's not going to be that useful. I think taking the bombs or the rockets may be more useful. But then you have a look at the 37 and you're like, okay, this is where daddy comes to town. Look at this mamba jamba. What you have is 66 rounds for this. So if we have a look at the statistics on this 37, I believe it's very similar to the one you find on the JU87G series. You get 142 millimeters of penetration with its HVAP, and then its air targets. I mean, I don't know why you'd take this unless you want to try and make a YouTube montage. 4 millimeters of Heft, but if it connects, if it registers, you are annihilating anything that you hit there. But most of the time, you want to go HVAP, be able to kill medium tanks, be able to kill heavy tanks, all of that good stuff. On top of this, you can actually take the gun pods with some rockets. So let's say you want to still keep the 37, you can bring along 4 rockets as well. These rockets, the way that they're designed in the game is, as you can see, they are actually angled upwards, so you have to be below the target so they fire straight. It can be a bit confusing. If you want practice with them, you should try this aircraft or some of the 410s, which have a very similar arc of fire. Then on top of this, if you just want to take some bomb loads, you have 1250s, 2 250s, 1 500, 2 500s, 1,000, and then 1 250, and then 1,000 kilos. So this thing is heavy. When we look at the secondary weapons, there's a lot of them. They're all going to add a ton of weight. They're going to annihilate your performance, but if they work out, you're going to have a great time. What we're going to do in this video is go through and run the rockets and also the 37mm, so I can show you all the different gun sounds and all of that good stuff. That is not the 37mm though, let's not screw this up now. So this version is your ground attacker version in my head. At least that's how I see it. Other people may see it as the version which is designed to aircraft with extreme prejudice, but for me personally, I see it as an aircraft which is just designed to pop medium and heavy tanks, to be able to annihilate them without prejudice, and be the most useful version in ground realistic. Now around the 3.7 BR you have actually a decent lineup for ground realistic for Germany, meaning that this may make a guest appearance in a lot of people's lineups. That lineup revolves around the Panzer IV-G and the F2, and some of the Panzer IIIs. You also have some pretty good tank destroyers around there, the Stugs, but overall it is the medium tanks that rule the roster there. So let's have a look at this. Let's also have a look at the gun on the back. That is the sound of the 7.92 when you're next to it. Something that you also may have heard is the secondary sounds there, where you can hear the little bit of the whining. Let's just kill the our side guy. But you can hear the clicks of the gun, and you can also hear the whining of it, which is something that is definitely interesting. I feel like that would get annoying after a while, but most of the time you're not really going to sit in this first person point of view. This is the BF-110 cockpit. I'm not sure if it was updated from before, but it is one of the beautiful... Well then, this is one of the most beautiful cockpits in game in my opinion. It's simple, it's interesting, it's effective at what it does, and the MB157s are coming. So, let's see what each gun does. So if we use our default rounds, that is the MG15120s. And then the cannon rounds, or the secondary rounds, are the 37s and the MK108s. Okay, so in this, if you have your guns set to primary and secondary, which I'm sure a lot of you do, then the primary is seen as the cannons, which don't seem to have a hole. They may want to fix that. Obviously the dev server is subject to change all the time, but yeah, that seems to be a bit of an issue with the model there. Do the guns overlap? No, the guns just don't exist. Yeah, okay, so that's a definite issue with the model. If somebody wants to send in a bug report about that, please be my guest. I'll make sure to do it myself. I'm guessing the idea is you can't run the MG151s with the 37, or it's just not modeled correctly. So the issue with running a 37 at some MG151s and also some 30s is they all have different muzzle velocities. So taking out aircraft with the MG151s and the MKs is a good idea. Hey up, calm down. Alright, let's see the maneuverability of this. Oh dear. Okay, well that's not good. Alright, the maneuverability is, I think substandard is definitely a word I'd use. We do have combat flaps though, which is nice. And then we do not have an air brake. But we're weaping right now, and the engines, I mean, it's safe to say they're struggling. I'm not surprised. They're full of ammunition. There's a lot of stuff going on here. Is it better than the Duck? I mean, it keeps energy a hell of a lot better than the Duck. But the issue is the overall maneuverability is shot by the extra weapons that this thing has. So in a straight line, you may actually get a decent amount of kick out of it when it comes to the speed of this. But if you're not in a straight line and you are trying to maneuver with an enemy, well, that ain't gonna go well for you. It does feel nice though. The DB engines do have a tendency of overheating, which is what you're seeing right now. Oh my god. But with that said, it still feels nice. The elevator is responsive enough. It feels better than the Duck does massively because it has a bit more power in the engines. It is not always, it's not going to feel good all the time, but you can see how much ammunition this thing has. If one of these is left alone to just hit ground targets, then you're going to have matches over incredibly quickly. This is an issue that the Horton had, and also the DO335. If you left those vehicles alone, then they could end the maps incredibly quickly in air realistic, and in ground realistic they had a little bit of a place, but overall they weren't that useful. Do you take this thing over a BF-109 in ground realistic? I don't think you do, and the reason for that is because this is not going to be useful for you after that initial hit. Now if you are available to be able, if the sky is clear and there's no fighters about, I think you do take this over the BF-109. Oh, this poor MB-157. Oh dear. Well, at least the turret can have a go. Go on, turret. No. Oh, yeah, the turret does not have good coverage. It also cannot go down at all. But it does have a high fire rate, it does have good muzzle velocity, so taking stuff out with it is shouldn't be too hard to do. Yeah, you can. This thing is definitely a lumberer. This is not something that you want to fight with. This is something you want to ground pound with, and that's it. And then in ground realistic, when you're using it to hopefully kill a few tanks and then get back to base. The amount of ammunition is crazy though, so whenever you have a vehicle like this, if it is left alone, it will annihilate all of the AI around the area. It will annihilate anything near it, and therefore you have to keep an eye on it. It's very similar to a lot of aircraft that have just been added to the game, whether it be the F4JB, whether it be the IL-28SH, whether it even be the AD4s from a while back. All of these aircraft have these characteristics where if left alone, they will win the match single-handedly. And because of the ammunition on the 37 here, because of the ground striking abilities of either the 420s or the 230s, and I'm sure the air spawn that this thing will have, overall it's going to be really good at a specific role, and it will have to be stopped. It'll also have some great fighter support. 3.7, you've got the BF-109 F4s, you've got the G2s, and they're some of the best BF-109s in the game. So being able to defend this thing is going to be the full force of the Luftwaffe behind you. The A1s, the A5s, the F4s, the G2s. So yeah, overall, this thing is going to need protecting, but it can single-handedly win you a game with the objectives set up in it right now. An interesting machine. It's going to be weird to see how much it is used in Aerialistic. I feel a lot of people are going to pass it up, and then the people who actually do use it will realize how good it is at that specific role. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.